Yep. So I kind of thought about this in 3 phases. The first phase was Cecil was doing the work. Yep. The second phase is Kara and Alex working together. And, one of the things Alex has got in front of him is doing Skyward, because like we used to be on Smart Finance and a different finance system. So that would be new for Alex. Would be new for most people. Or most people are on the other system. And then the third phase is sort of just coaching and checking in, also kind of strategy and thinking off of Cecil and Karen. So yeah, I'm super appreciative of the work of that content. All the staff, very much appreciated. Thank you.
We are ready. And if everyone could turn their mics on, just a reminder to turn your mic on. Thank you.
First item on the agenda is fiscal year 27 budget.
Thank you. It's Sean Kara is online, so thank you for being able to jump in, Kara. She was very instrumental, obviously helpful in getting everything prepared for tonight. This is a part of the process that we've been doing for quite some time. Since I've been here, as far as how we develop the budget, we started the conversation on timelines and assumptions and things like that. So that's what we went through tonight. Kara, since you're remote, I think I'll just sort of drive and then I might defer to you for to fill in some gaps, like other commentary and all you, if that's okay.
She's nodding her head. You can't see her right now.
All right. So the objectives tonight is to create common understanding of our budget process, to review that, how we go about getting this done, and then, like I said, to get the assumptions in place because those drive those the variables that go into creating that budget. We'll, like I said, review the process. We'll take a little bit of a look at our current situation. We won't spend as much time there as we maybe have in the past. We just had our truth and taxation meeting a couple weeks ago where we went through a lot of that detail. So we just kind of hit some highlights there. We'll review the timeline and we have a hard copy here in front of you. We'll talk about the assumptions of the sheet. Strip one for real here. It's real similar to what we went through last year. And between myself and Carol, we'll kind of go into how we came to the data this year. And why we believe our recommendations are sound, and then we'll talk about where we go. So how we work through this is an overview. Tonight's meeting, the budget is fine-tuned or developed based on those assumptions as we've talked about a lot. Our 2 biggest drivers for our revenue are how many kids we have and how much we're going to get from the state. Like those are the 2 biggest drivers on the revenue side, both of which we don't know today. And with how many kids we have, we won't know that until next year. And on the state allocation side, we won't know that until they establish their inflationary adjustment. So we have some, what we think are some good thoughts about where the state's going to land on that. We'll share that in a minute. Once that draft budget is done, we'll take a look at that, go over that with the board, and then the board, if there are reductions that need to be made to balance the budget, we'll talk about that, the target will be set, and if we need to do that. And then at that point, it's wheels moving as far as communication, strategy sessions with leaders, and communication with stakeholders. We have a number of statutory processes that we need to follow, contractual processes that we need to follow. Ultimately, we need to have that budget adopted in June. So that's what our process is like moving forward. Any comments or questions on that? This is a rhythm that we've kind of been in pretty steady here for the last 6 years, so it should feel familiar to many people. Just a few bullets to kind of recap again. We go deep into this. just to do a flyover. After 7 years of deficit spending, we had positive balanced budgets for 3 years. This would have been another one had it not been for the OPEB spending we needed to do. So we can't say we had a balanced budget for fiscal 26 come out of an audit because we had over that as we go status. We have made reductions of about $100 million in the position over time. Our unreserved fund balance, you see that graph ad nauseum, down to about 2% fiscal 22, up over the board's goal of 10%, and we've kind of been hovering there, tickling down a little bit. And again, because of the deficit spent for fiscal 26, we will come down there, but that should stabilize based on our ability to levy things costs. We have tentative agreements with our 3 largest groups. If you remember a year ago, one of the things we talked about in order to limit reductions for this spring, one of the things we talked about needing to stick to was to hold tight and be really smart and tough on our how we settle our contracts. Employees have been working with us in partnership on that. We have tentative agreements that kind of kept us in line with what we really needed to be and in line with our budget, and that'll help us move forward. We do have some uncertainty about the impact of the move for our retirees into their Medicare plan. There will be an increase in our stop loss premium. That's sort of like insurance, if you will. It kind of protects you against those really high claims. We're not really sure how that is going to play out. We know obviously all this affects our retiree premiums in a good way, but how it affects our active employees and our stop loss premium. We're a little bit uncertain. I should mention again, if I haven't previously, every 2 years we have to do a rebid of our insurance. It's a law of the Healthcare Insurance Transparency Act. And so this is our year to do that. So we'll be soliciting bids, their quotations of bids from providers. Typically we get 3 or 4, and after that process, the Fringe Benefit Committee will give our recommendations to the board as far as a rate and a carry. The state budget forecast, if you pay attention on, is great. There's a surplus right now, but long term, it looks good. There should be an update coming in February, I believe, is the next budget update. And this session, the 2026 session, is there are people, even legislators, saying don't expect anything to get done. It's a policy of audit here, so that kind of links itself to nothing dramatic. And the other reason why there probably will be a lot getting done is that every single person in the legislature is up for election. And this is a good time to go for this. So there's not a lot of optimism about getting things done. I think from the school district standpoint, it took years and years and years and years and years to get an inflationary component to the state funding to schools, and our goal really is to just hang on to that. I don't think there's any, realistic hope to get anything on top of that. That was the intention. I think hanging on to that inflationary component is what our goal is. We do have long-term questions around compensatory revenue, and having served on that compensatory revenue task force and having had a number of meetings, I could probably talk for an hour and a half on the details of that source. I won't, but if you have questions about it, I can certainly dig into it. I can tell you that we have a legislative preliminary report due on January 26th. The final report isn't due until October of this year, I believe, if my memory's right. There's no way there will be a resolution to the compensatory revenue formula question. I think the common belief and advocacy is we need to extend the whole harmless clause that was in place for this year until that formula can get until that recommendation can completely play out. So it's a significant thing that happens. So we're talking about priorities for this legislative session. That is one that I think every education organization needs to go to the wall for, is that home harmless rate is intact. Unemployment insurance, money was set aside that will be invested through the summer. Again, one-time money, and there are a lot of long-term questions about whether that will get funded in the future, and depending on the elections this fall, whether that'll continue to go through. The Minnesota Patriots are both in that same category. I know that one of the things that we are all watching is the early access, the early applications to that program. My understanding is that within the first few days of January, 10% of the allocation has been accounted for within the first few days. So, and way more than had anticipated. So, the superintendents, I think as a group, our opinion is that will be underfunded, and they'll need to increase the contributions on both the employer and the employee side of that before too long for that program to be solved. A few graphs. This is our fund balance graph, and again, fiscal 26, you can see a dip there again because of our OPEB costs that would be rolled into that fiscal year. Otherwise, we would be sitting right about where we need to sit. So much improved, but this isn't one of those graphs or these situations that we could just rest on. We have to constantly be mindful of where we are after being so close to SOB. This is a graph that we'll talk about a lot. I think that all school districts should be talking about a lot. This is updated to for 2003 to 2026 now. This shows the gap between the buying power, essentially, what the formula would have been had it not been disconnected from inflation like it was in 2003. $1,470 for people would have had on the formula. Multiply that by about 4, and you can get a sense of how many billions of dollars it would be for 5.6 billion dollars. Very significant for operations. It would look like a whole business. This graph, I put this one together to share with you at the TFT meeting. I thought it was really good. It shows the basic employment increase versus inflation. So, we get 2%, that seems to be the target all the time. Over time, that's not really the case with inflation. We can see a bump in fiscal 24, and there's some revenue there the state had. But that's what it looks like compared to inflation. You look at real buying power. And again, these things don't just affect schools, they affect individuals too, which makes it hard when we're talking about salary increases and contracts. Again, the graph you see before, our general fund revenues predominantly for the state, 75%, 78%. It's been stable over time, except for those COVID funding years when the federal funding was up to 89%. That kind of squeezed the bottom part of that 100% graph. But you can see, it's interesting. I've had some conversations with people about, that green piece and what does property taxes look like. You look at over time, we've gone from 15 up to 18 down to the last couple of years, 12, 13, 12% global. On the expenditure side, similar stability in terms of that story, really almost remarkable stability, plus or minus 1% over 10 years. Looking at this more generally, most of our expenditures for salaries and benefits. I've had comments from people about, 82%, that means that you're spending too much on salaries and benefits. And we had to have a conversation about, as a percentage, right? Like it's always going to be 100%. And so you could make that number smaller a couple different ways. If we wanted to spend more money on non-staff and benefits, then we're making that blue bar get bigger. That's not where we want it to go. That number gets bigger when you go through cuts. If you try to make cuts away in the classroom as much as you can. That's why I was just going to. And then finally, our general fund operations expenditures and revenues graph. And you can kind of see it where you can see the years where the blue is above. That's when we're building fund balance. This fiscal 24, again, going back, we had strategically used our COVID funding, protected general fund dollars. That helped. We also had special process fee, big increase that year as well. So that was again, this was the year right after that fiscal, the 2023 session. The deficit roughly 26. Yep. If we were, the deficit in fiscal 26 is a function of that whole thing. Karen, anything to add? Please do that.
Kara, we can't hear you in 1 second. Right. Speaker. I wonder if the volume is turned down. Let's see. Oh, let's try this. That looks like it's muted.
Can you hear me now?
No. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Can you
go back to the slide 9?
I don't know what slide.
Yeah, there, right there. You just talked about that. I don't think you said 82% of salary benefits is too much, too much of the budget. Well, you hit it on the head when you said if that goes down, something else goes up. And when you look at our taxes and other levels, how that is such a small percent, the only way that amount ever got bigger is due to more than less use. You guys know that we cannot levy more on our taxpayers. So we are really restricted to that amount. So the fact that our taxes are now 12% for this year, fiscal year 26, part of our budget is only because we got that kick for the special ed cost subsidy, and we're getting money for the state routes project and for the solar project. Those are a bigger part of the budget. It's not like we're getting less money for taxes, other than our decrease in our enrollment. That is what drives that. But it's not like we're getting less money, and it's not like we got more money from taxes back in fiscal year 18-19. That's basically remained flat. So I thought that was really interesting that you talked about that. And then you showed the revenues and expenses data to your slide on. We would have a surplus if not for the zero. And you guys know as our expenses go up, we need to have that surplus to have that fund balance. Because just as a factor of that percentage, our fund balance to expenses, as our expenses go up, our fund balance needs to go up to maintain that level. So we drop down, but it's fairly sure that we have a small surplus to get to our 10% that is in the policy. Does that make sense?
I think that's a really small nuance here, but I think we have to continue to call that out. You know, if you rewind to fiscal 17, 10% of 50 million is less than 10% of 68 million. So just to maintain a 10% fund balance there, you have to have an increase in the fund balance just to, in terms of real dollars, just to maintain a consistent percentage. So it's a really, really good point. It's a really, really important reason to talk about having a surplus every year, just because you know expenses are going to go up. All right. Looking at a little more detailed timeline, you approved the audit this fall. Through the taxation in December, timeline developed, and then today shared with you. In February, we have a teacher retirement notification due. That's in our contract, and so there's some incentives there. We got a couple of retirements trickle in, and I'm guessing we'll see some over the next couple of weeks. We have another work session scheduled for February 2nd, and we're meeting the same decision that month on the reduction of, if necessary, kicking off the meeting with leads of administrators, directors, and meeting leaders. Additional work sessions to review reductions as they play out. The goal would be, if we need to make reductions, and then we do on the 13th of March. Strategy meetings occur in March, and then the ULA process, the other question you asked, process in March, if that's necessary. With again the target for the fiscal 27, we're not just target the requirement that we have that fiscal 27 budget wrapped up and finished. Any questions on the timeline?
So the March dates that we talked about earlier, start dates, required by law.
It's a good question, Tom. Yeah, it's a good question. So everything really starts working backwards from June 30th. If we knew that if we knew we were going to be making reductions, and we knew that there were going to be no requested leaves of absence, we could, on June 28th, make cuts. We could let people know that, hey, you're not renewed. We technically could do that. The problem comes in when you start having requested leaves of absence. Individuals that are affected by that are entitled to due process, and then due process has timelines associated with it that start pushing back days and pushing it back days. So you really, in order to not be in trouble in June, you have to have this stuff figured out by mid-April so that you can get those notices done, so that you can have the hearings if necessary, so that
so you've got a couple of weeks buffer.
Yes, that's right. Yep, that's right. Yep. Okay. And there have been times that there are districts, that push it out a little bit further. And it's convenient for the school district to wait longer because, it's also harder on people that are working here to not go with their job. And that's not the situation we want people to be in if they don't have to be in that situation. On both sides, if we're able to stay up and back, that's great. They can have the rest of the spring going. They're not worried about that. Or if they need to get out there and start looking, it just seems fair, the best way to treat people. Sometimes
Yeah, just that.
Yeah.
Not where we want to be right now. So we always got work to do.
Let's see. Some people know this is a few timelines. Again, this is what's complicated in all school budget. Legislative action is unknown. Health insurance, that renewal won't happen until March after the orders are landed. We have tentatives, like I said, with three groups, our three biggest groups. We have a number of associations and groups yet to really get close. I think we're haven't met as many times with the next group of associations. So there's some things in there that just, we have to do our best. As we think about this, our goal internally is to finish the year with a positive balanced budget, again, outside of OPEB, to make sure the rest of the budget is tight and that's taken care of. We always produce actual data when it's available. Our approach has been conservative and unapologetically conservative. We also want to be realistic too, because if we're more conservative than we need to be, then that means that we end up making reductions that we don't need to make. But we've been unapologetically conservative, at least in that side of the balance. We don't like cutting, we don't want to cut. If we can limit those, we will. And then balancing our budget is the priority as we move forward. If you look at this as an overview, we'll kind of do a flyover, and then we'll dig into these one by one and kind of work right through your sheet. The numbers on the sheet correspond to the numbers that will be on our slides, so we'll be able to follow along. And what I'm looking for from the board tonight is consensus about our assumptions. These aren't hard and fast in stone. We know that some of these can change. And if you remember last spring, we tweaked some of our assumptions midstream because the session started. We got some information. We tweaked some of our assumptions. So that can happen. But what we're looking for tonight is consensus to continue moving forward. All right, enrollment, our biggest driver. Many factors go into this. We went into detail last year with this group, sort of through this. Kara has done a significant evaluation of our trends, looking at class retention from second grade kids moving to third grade, looking at our current incoming kindergarten classes, going senior classes. As we've talked about, last year's kindergarten class was very small, and this year's recommended enrollment assumption is based on the assumption that we'll have another small kindergarten class. We don't have any data to indicate that it's going to be dramatically bigger. In talking to preschool programs, they validate that's a big trend we've seen. So the number that you're not comfortable with is 36.5. Karen, do you have any addition to add to that?
That number doesn't include receiving virtual values. I don't know if you've seen the latest, we had 70 virtual academies a few weeks ago. So an assumption that will increase slightly. Just know that we're still using students to outside of the district, but these are 70 students that we would not have if not for that. So, and the other thing to be aware of is, we watched it the last, as long as I've been here, our classes continue to get smaller, and so when they get smaller, it not only affects that current year, but it continues to affect the future years, because that class of 300 move through, eventually graduates and is replaced with, this year's kindergarten classes at 207 right now. So, we graduated a class in fiscal year 25 of 333 students, and we replaced it with a kindergarten class of 207. That's a big difference, right? 30% difference. So that is part of the reason
You said a limited increase in the virtual. What was?
I put it on the motion.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty good increase in percentage wise.
This enrollment trend, I had to I was actually as part of the administrative task force in a meeting with the state of Iowa, and it was fascinating to hear her talk about the state trends. We are aging as a state, and so that's replicated nationally. We talk about, she talks about replacement, the 2.2 kids to keep a population level, and we are at like 1.8, 1.7. And so it's getting smaller, and I think what she had said, the caveat she said was that this was the first time that we have fewer kids in school than we have 65 of them. Yeah. So this isn't just a grant opportunity for the school issue. I think it may be more slower to affect us, but it's here, and we're seeing. With that said, one of the things that Kara shared at our meeting this, I think it was this fall, was looking back 20 years at enrollment. We had a period of time in the early 2000s that we were dipped down far from this number, and it came back and dipped down again. So I think economy and housing and all these things.
So when we talk about net growth, I think that's a number critical to everything we're talking about.
Yeah.
Challenges. How does that compare in state to out state?
Yeah.
Exactly. Ratio significantly between, as you go from each of the city areas.
The data that I provided would show that outstate is declining at a faster rate than metro. Most metro districts are declining. There are a few that are growing, but again, the rate is just less. And then what also happens often once you get out into rural, and this is a little bit I would say maybe it was a year or later to realize that regional centers have been affected slower than small communities. Those small districts have seen higher percentages earlier than regional centers like hospitals are starting to migrate in.
I think when we go to legislators to talk about this, that have got large targets of compensation to schools, because that's a huge factor. And it's not linear.
Right.
Right.
And I think too, the return is I talked about this effect of state aid. Kara is reminding me and others that this also affects our local sources because many of our levies are based on how many kids we have to. Any concerns with moving forward with this as our number?
What was our number last year? Just the overall.
The
3685.
It was 37.
I think it was 3788.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I see it was 100, but it was 2 started. Sounds okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I think it was like 3788. And right now, so in January, normally I have Linda Larson, who's our Mars person, give me accounts every week, and I want to know if, kids in seats, how many kids do we have? And now in January, I start to look at the average daily numbers, right? How else kids have routine now, the kids coming into our district, the kids leaving our district, and how is that going to look at it? So I don't know if we're established ADM report for our district, and I think that we'll probably end somewhere close to 3768, 3780, pretty close to where we ended up, and I know that, we're up and grappling, and that's good. From what we heard from the activity, it was a good to be done kids that we can always the kids that are moving from their high school and middle school to the virtual school. So this 3,685 students is a decrease of 2.2% from where, give or take, I think we'll end the year fiscal year 26. And I know that's a good number, and I don't
just looked and we were at 3811 last year, so. It's not really good. It's not really good. It's not really good. Yes.
We've done a few of those development lessons. So we got to find this group.
I think it's like this is what we built like
I think it's conservative. And I think the closest to it is the best.
The next assumption is state basically, and I copied this in or reading what like we statutes. The statute that drives the inflationary increase. You know this demand has been established as between 2 and 3% based on inflation. Advocacy groups will see money on top of that. I don't think that's likely, like I said before. I think this is my this language is frustrating. The aftercare I talked about it based on early indicators and quarter four data. 2.7% is the number that we feel is reasonable. Could be 3, but 2.7 is the number that we feel is reasonable based on early indications that we've seen. Karen, do you want to add any flash to that?
Yeah, so I know that the federal increase to Social Security is 2.8% for this year now. The other thing that I did look at in the levy calculation, districts that are lucky enough to have an operating referendum, most of them have an annual inflation factor in there. And that the annual inflation factor for the levy right now is at 2.37%. So this 2.7% that we're using may be a little high, but that, if it goes from 2.7 to 2.4, 2.37, that's not a big amount. That would be a big etc. So, we'll just keep an eye on what the state comes up with in the next month. We should know.
So the two-parter here is the board would like to assume that we won't get anything on top of inflationary. I think that's the first assumption, that we won't get anything, we won't get anything beyond what the state's obligated to do. And so that's A. B is we'll want to estimate this inflationary increase to be.
I don't think we should project anything on top of this. I don't think we can get on top of looking at the state's situation. Right.
Okay. So then it turns out inflationary increase. What do you feel comfortable with?
We have a little bit of time for finalizing states. We have another slate.
Right. Yeah, we should. I would say by our February board meeting, that's February 2nd, it's possible we'll have a number here. So it could be just let's put 2.7 in for now and then adjust when we know. Does that sound like a reasonable way to move?
I think I do so.
Treasurer,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
okay. All right. Referendum revenue. I put this in here. It's an assumption. I think the board's committed to community engagement at this point. I don't think there's a plan to, the plan is to continue to engage with the community until the board feels like the community is interested in that. My recommendation is we don't include local referendum revenue for pay 20, revenue pay 27.
Great. Great.
Then when we look at other state aids, these are just sort of some particulars. There are a lot of state aid categories, and we kind of wrap those up into the bottom of there. That all the other ones that we know about continue at the number, and 4B, I should say, 4B and 4C. Those will continue as we go. The big one here is the old harvest around the story. And if you look at the sheet that you have, I have a little bit more kind of drawn out description of what's happened there. But to put it in a nutshell, that the compensatory revenue is based on poverty, and the way the state had previously measured poverty was through educational benefit forms. That was the mechanism. I can tell you based on this task force work that across the country, most states have mechanisms like this. They're either using forms, or they're using direct certification, which I'll talk about in a second, or they're using some combination. A few years ago, the state decided to move away from forms to direct certification, which means that our count would only include students who were receiving some form of county benefit or maybe in foster care. That affected districts differently. Some districts were winners, some districts were losers. And one of the things I've learned is that there is no easy characterization of a district that was hard or a district that did well. Maybe the only thing you can say across the board is that districts that did a really good job of collecting forms were in general harmed by the change. Other than that, if you told me a metro district that was benefited by the change, I can tell you what was harmed. If you told me a big school district that was helped, I can tell you what big school district was harmed. I can do the same with rural. So it's not like a real clean piece of this, because there's way more. There are way more variables to come into play here. Because of the dramatic change this caused in the many districts that were going to be harmed, a little harvest provision was put in. That helped us last year. Remember the process we went through? We originally, our assumption was we're going to lose a bunch of money here. We changed that once the law, it came through the law that there was going to be probably some movement on that. That reduced our reduction total. As I said previously, there isn't reason at this point to believe that this compensatory revenue puzzle is going to be solved by October. In fact, or by the session. In fact, the final report's not due till October. So the difference between, and I listed on here, I think, the difference between, on the top of the second page, the difference between whole harvest happening and them reverting to exclusively direct certification is about $2 million. It's the difference between 2.2 and change and 4.2 and change. It's a huge issue. And again, not just direct to the schools. This hits the biggest district in the state, arguably, in terms of total dollars. So I think this would be priority number one for head agencies to maintain last year's spending level. Doesn't mean the state is putting in more, it just means they're maintaining the spending level. I think this is a very likely scenario, because I don't think, they put this task force in play for a reason, and it won't have played out that reason yet. So this is the assumption that I feel comfortable with at this point. Kurt, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you could extend on if we did this calculation and I look at it, our direct students, And, compared to what we had in fiscal year 24, and I'm just very thankful that my staff did such a good job, follow, 23, collecting these forms, because if not, they don't do anything to do on it. Even though they were students, I think last year, in fact, there was close to $700,000 we're looking at as an increase. And we found that now this year it is over $2 million. There's no full earnings by district legacy. It is compensatory funding. So we advocate for itself that we're at the MSP conference this week. This should be a number of important business.
Any comments, questions?
Yeah, I can't see the right.
It's been a very interesting process. I think one of the things that, you know, I think it's raised awareness that many school districts are finding themselves in a spot to use compensatory revenue to fill holes created by inadequate funding span. So I think there are many advocates for the original intention of this revenue that was surprised to learn that districts are using it just to pay.
I think it's probably yes, so that we have it is something that is good and fine, I agree with that, but this can have a huge impact on the budget if folks are not.
I mentioned on the committee earlier, we don't have, a large concern this summer. Moving out this summer, that could change. So it's something that we're going to be, discussing for quite some time unless legislation is either put in place to permanently fund it or to revoke it. And 100% will have to do with what happens. Yeah, that's based on a typical, what we would experience in unemployment costs in a typical state. Green Act, we're still implementing requirements for that. There is no more aid in the way there was before. There's still money that's been allocated to pay for training that the state provides. So the state's paying the training directly, but in terms of paying our staff, there's no additional Green Act dollars coming. And then energy transition, we talked about this last year. This has to do with the decommissioning of solar power over time. So this is a steady, we get the decreases a little bit every year as in preparation of that property tax adjustment that we want to inevitably. But I think inevitably soon. Who knows?
When is that good something?
Yeah. So it gave us a number, it was like $400,000, and it decreases by a certain percent every year. And I don't think any of us will be around by the time it's done.
I think it's like 5%. It's a real long. I think it decreases by 5% a year.
5%. So
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Number 5, federal funding. The recommendation is to assume that federal aid will be frozen. Karen, do you have any insight on that? Or anything else to add to it, maybe?
I think it's just safe to do the basic titles and the basic special ed. There's been no talk of cutting those recently, so I think just making them flat is a safe assumption.
Okay, there's been discussion on federal, or they call for food services federal level. Yeah, there is that. And actually, the others, I mean, some of it can be a bit sort of cost.
Yeah.
Is that something?
Yeah, it would be very
risk here or not? Or
I don't think it is yet, but so the change that Tom's referring to, yeah, following that is a this chatter about moving to schools being required to not use any processed food whatsoever. Everything would have to be fresh, fresh or frozen, whatever that would look like. I think how that would play out very interestingly in Minnesota, where you have free school meals today like we do. It would blow Minnesota out of the water where it came to free school meals. That or I just don't know how they would do that. I mean, that would be fascinating to watch. But
pretty confident that they would have.
I think right. It's a good question. It'll be interesting to watch. I mean, like again, it's one of these concepts that sound really, really good, right? Like the word is healthy and for many children, the meals they get at school might be the only meals they get. So we want to be as healthy as possible. And then, some areas in the country are really easy to go others we live with. So
Something like this could happen when we start looking at the first ways we implemented change in the school nutrition and decrease the amount of salt and sodium and sugars, and schools have the same concerns that we went through. So, not to say it would be a big deal, but we have lived through something similar to this.
Prior to that, we used to have sugar pop machines in the hallways. And that was field trip money. I mean, I was grateful back then. And I remember the checks we get from Pepsi. It was like, yeah, we can do this, we can do that. But earlier, the kids out there put us into place. These young entrepreneurs would run uptown and buy a kids some on do at holiday and come and sell it here in the locker. Still do that.
So when we talked about it, we did some funding for April.
Yep.
Or like say for whatever. As far as the aid, is there how significant is that when you look at our budget? I mean, is there a difference between how big of a difference is it when you just do a big order versus that?
Sure.
And then not only that, I guess my question is how do we allocate that? Is it just for big order? Because we're talking students that are on this a long ways. Is it on a per student basis? Do they look at the lesson or is it on per school basis?
The main drive join in. I think the main drive was how far the school is doing the remote school from the other schools in the district. So like, O'Neill might be very remote, but it's the only school in this area, so then, it's different. Karen, you want to talk a bit more about that? Do you have anything off the top?
I just looked up what our sparsity is for fiscal year 26. So the year we're in sparsity is $740,000 right now, and adjusted ADM, so let's just say 3,800. So it is a significant amount per student, and that is right. So when I work on the levy, I have to input the distance from each of our high schools to the nearest high school, and the same with our elementary schools. And that's how sparsity is calculated, the distance between the nearest and next school. So, thank you for sparsity up in Bigford. You know, a student up there, I can't tell you right off the top of my head, of like 740,000, how much it is per kid, but it is significant when you think about it.
But so if we bus kids in to Rapids for the long distance, just the cost, that extra cost would be incurred on this. Really doesn't result. But, you know, the idea is there's
and there is transportation sparsity too. That's a separate big category.
But it's simply the distance between schools. They're the next nearest school.
Yeah.
And if it's applied, there's in that school when it's
that's right.
Yeah.
It is different between elementary and high school.
Okay. But it's a flat rate as far as what's qualified for it. Is that what you're saying, Kara?
I'm not 100% up on that.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'm just kind of curious because I mean that's a number, right? It's a good number.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, looking at 6, you know, this is where again, from year to year, things change. Last year, we were sitting here, we didn't have a clue what we were looking at for the next 2 years with contracts. This year, we're in a situation where we have a pretty good idea of where we're going to land based on tentative agreements, and you know, the fact that those tentative agreements represent a significant portion of the staff. So we can, you know, based on those tentative agreements and what we've established, get really close on staffing costs. So that this is a pretty straightforward assumption. And we should, you know, I would say in the next 2 weeks we should have votes completed on those 3 main groups. Health insurance, I mentioned the HIPAA process this spring. Bids are required in 2 years. I mentioned the removal of 65 plus from the active plan and that'll have an effect on the stop loss premium. Our Kara reached out to George Vanderwait, who's our insurance consultant, and he's been doing this a long time in a lot of places. I think at the time that we've worked with George, he's really steered us in good directions as far as what we need to do. And if you don't have to go very far back to see a health insurance fund that was restricted, but to see a health insurance fund that was on the verge of some really, really big problems, and those restricted fund problems would have become our general fund problems and would not turn that health insurance fund around. So with George's help and advice, we've been able to put that health insurance fund in a stable place, in a place that's grown, and he's feeling that an estimate of 7.5% is a reasonable place to be. Kara, you had that conversation with him. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, he would say 7.5%.
Oh, you would.
George would give us a number. So I feel 7.5%, knowing that we've been doing okay with our fund this year. So this is a very, really rough estimate. So that's the number I can do. George wouldn't comment yet.
He would.
He would not comment.
He did last year. I looked at the numbers from last year at this meeting. We estimated 8 and 6.5 last year.
So when we talk about that number here at 7.5, does that include increases to or not? I mean, no, we can make for those increases, but I'm kind of curious what.
Yeah.
Or that's
a good question. No, it's a separate calculation. So the 7.5% is the increase on our premiums, So, the district normally pays the 10%, or the 90% of employees pay the 10% for most of them. It's strictly the health insurance premium. Then I did not, then go into what, our OPEB total cost would be. I supplement at about, a little over $4 million, but within the next few weeks, we should know what our new, monthly amount is for our retirees. Because just January 1st is when that new Medicare supplement plan went into place, we don't know, I don't have a number yet for what our monthly cost is. We don't have the amount of employees that change and what they're paying versus who is and what their paying cost is. Our whole employees will face this looking at this in the next few weeks.
I mean, ultimately, yeah, we had to pick this year of about a half a year, if I remember right, but it was an elevated cost with that change in plan where the state some, so I just kind of have to feel for where right?
Well, in this chamber, anytime you have a change like this, and we had three, I'm trying to figure out if it was a gap or whatever, but if you rewind, we went from this platinum plan to a healthcare savings plan, and then we shortened the plan year for the next year to be on a cycle with our budget, and then we made this change. So every single one of those changes has an effect on our active plan, right? So we saw, and I think George commented at our last meeting, we saw a little flurry of activity as, and I think the assumption is that we had some retirees who were getting some health care done prior to having to jump onto the medical. Just like we had some people get some surgeries on the platinum plan right before we jumped into the HSA plan because they were paying, just a small amount. So there are a few variables in there, and it will be nice to settle into a rhythm here.
Well, there's time.
Yeah.
With every one of them, so it's really hard to get that.
Yeah. The good news is, and this goes back to the concept and the importance of the fund balance. We've built our health insurance fund balance to the place where we can absorb a little nuance, a little variability, because of the growth we've had over the last few years. 3 years ago, I couldn't say that. So we have a little more room to move.
I think some of the with for now. Just to clarify, we planned 2% last year, we ended up 6, we got 68.
Just planning, we assumed 8, we got about 6.5. 6.5 is the number of the line. Is that right?
I think I'm like 6.7, like 0.2.
Yeah. So, okay, thank you. And
Karen, do you want to talk about how you handle inflation? It's kind of varying from year over year. I put 2.5 in here, but I really talk about how that works.
Yeah, there's so many factors, and it's so early in the year. So we do have 6 more months until the budget has to be approved. But just to get a baseline, I did not have a percentage in there. So at 2.5%, and then I take a fraction on change in enrollment. So change in enrollment and inflation factor. And we know that every expense is changes because our enrollment changes. It'll be nice because enrollment on our expenses and we have just specific things. For instance, our utilities. Our utilities are up this year. Our enrollment is down. And things like instructional supplies, those are things that we can say, yes, our enrollment is going down. And that is something that is consistent here. So And then building improvements, just, trying to put a good baseline. We added an HVAC person this year. I don't know if they've been hired yet. We added a carpenter who has been hired. How does that affect our expenses? Taking those things into account. So, those are the assumptions we use when looking at our expense line items.
I think you want to think about the position we're looking at specifically, we're going to do something like house too.
Right.
So, I mean, I hear you, but that was done with the intention of should be a net positive for us.
It's a word that we use to understand it, not just adding on, more positions.
I'll capture it. See it then.
Yes.
And if it doesn't, it now we're all
That's right. So,
For the 3 buses, is that what would Greg's?
Craig would probably say 5 or 6. You had a little pair. Has he given you the number yet?
He's answering, but I think 5 or 6 is what he said he'd like to purchase each year. And when I started, it was 5 he was purchasing each year.
at least 1 year with 0.
We did. I think we were only 2 years with the draw.
Another thing we got, in the projects we have, these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, meeting. Okay.
Yeah. And you get that, and it's important. And it's, we don't forget what we do, right? Especially when the crew kids.
It's like, connected. You are we ever able to look at like service businesses? I did. Somebody brought that up.
They brought up an idea of leasing. I don't know if you were going to talk to Cheryl about it.
So, we talked to the an opportunity to explore it, we got taken a second, but the sheriff's office does these, and they obviously how that works. We could have to just kind of sit down and conversation with it. But it seems that we're dropping first. So you have a predictable payment structure, and you're probably you were less expense.
That's in my mind, believe these or every year. Yeah, all of it is something like that, right?
What we use is any sort of like our bond rate, that rate is access monthly, that we use for bond rate. What is that? I don't know if it's that or not, but it's
I don't know what that would affect your bond rating too much, but once again, the market for this is so large and it's so big on our buses. I don't know how we see that.
When deputies get closer to the mileage, and it's very again, it's something we want to explore, but we are potential positives. Are there any other specific improvements that those involved in
We don't have anything in fiscal year 27, for fiscal year 26, we have in, we do have a solar grant, $500,000. Last year, we budgeted 200, we didn't budget, we spent 208,000, but we have already scheduled for the exact same for fiscal year 26, the year we're in. I'm budgeting that we spend the remaining 300,000 in the general fund, and then we have $500,000 from leftover proceeds from bonds that we received in the past. If things fall out, then we can improve those savings in our utilities. I'm going to to the savings and the districts and others would recess that equipment in some sort of deal. So nothing yet. Our LTFM revenue has been decreasing. And the LTFM, our long-term facilities maintenance revenue, decreasing as our savings increase as we add with newer buildings, we update. So we just haven't had the money coming in, but I know that the need is still there. You guys know that too. We've spent a lot on long-term maintenance, and it's going to be the factors that we're talking here.
I would say that from a facilities perspective, the biggest expense we have, or expenses we have in the future are roof replacement and HVAC in the school. Yeah, those wires, yeah, those things. So in terms of planning, that's something that we can look at. Those, if those are done with air quality improvement, or we can somehow to pay for those, for the cost of those bonds, and all of the changes that go into rail, just things like that. Those things that we have to those expenses. I would say, immediately, and it's, what we have is we have a map of all of our facilities with, I can remember if it's green, yellow, red, it's kind of like that. Yeah. This should be fixed in the next 5 years. This should be fixed in the next 10 years. That kind of thing. So we have a map. We have some that need to be fixed in the next 5 years for sure. And we have 1 million, I don't know what the number is, but it's probably 900 square feet of 900,000 square feet of. You're always looking at the it's kind of like buses. It's like buses, it's like technology. So that's all right. Finally, next steps then we'll go back and work on a draft based on what we talked about tonight. I have a conversation with the Board of Finance Committee to make that work between then and our February 2nd meeting. At that February 2nd meeting, I'll ask the board to approve the resolution that you've been approving every spring, and even a lot of times when this isn't like a real forecastable production coming, having a resolution in place is good, so that in the event that there is an opportunity there, we can take advantage of that. So at that second meeting, that resolution will be on that agenda, and that reduction target will be there as well if necessary, and then we'll start the communication process, the leadership meetings from there. So that's sort of the path forward from here. Questions? I think that's That's it. Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Adam, Durham. Is there any others? Hearing none?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're good. Ah, great.
All right. Maybe with the service unit asked. Oh, great. All right.
Yeah.
All right, 1 down, 2 to go. So, you know, Brad, I do. Yes, yes. Sorry. Quickly, before, Julie and I talked today about getting one of the board
You're okay.
members, like, able to drive a school Suburban. You need a background check, for like next Tuesday's meeting in Big Fork. I'll be up there early, so I'm already qualified to drive it. Anybody have a interest, ability, whatever, to do that?
We already have background checks, right? So that would be, that's
Still have to do something.
Yeah, they have a
Specific for transportation.
And it's annual, it's like every year, but
Yeah,
if you want to
let's do it.
continue to, he has to do it every year.
You can't be driving around kids willy-nilly.
It's really simple. I mean, it really is a simple form and then you need to go in and get it, bring in your ID and they do it back on
Actually, it's okay that I'm here.
Bring it to where?
transportation, but I could get the form to you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
It's
you're
okay if I'm here for that meeting? Or-
Yes, yep, I have you down as attending.
Because I don't get on.
All right, it'll be nice to see.
You're good.
one person.
Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And someone will be here, I think Casey
Oh,
will be here to help.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
that's
Yeah.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. No, that's fine.
Julie, do I have more signing?
Nope, that's it.
Wow.
Night, yeah.
Got all my
Woohoo.
paperwork done.
Easy one.
Alex, it's a delight to have you here.
Thank
you
very
for
much.
coming tonight.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
I am as well.
Yeah.
You're a part of our.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Ad. It's marketing, right? So this is being developed right by sale. You have to go work with the buyers, get the pricing.
Sorry, I keep blowing up your email.
No, that's
account.
okay.
Well, we're not gonna do this, but what.
I know it's not a question for you, but there's like a whole bunch of purchase orders that need approving in there.
So
I don't know what to do with it.
I would not worry about them. I think Casey Rowan is doing all the approving because I've done.
Good luck down there.
getting
Thank you.
approved. So I think Casey Rowan is doing them. so
Okay.
I-
Or should I wait? Friday? I'm sure they are. Otherwise people would be.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah, so we moved up my start date to Friday because
Okay.
otherwise I'd have a gap in health insurance.
Amazing.
I don't know why the 19th versus the 16th matters, I guess.
Okay.
But that was, Casey figured that out. So
Okay. Good, so you'll be in.
I guess so, yeah. No, I will.
Yeah, I mean, for high school kids.
We talked about me just taking a vacation day just to.
Wow, that's what
Yeah, and it's a holiday, right? I don't-
Matt is out too.
But, when they do that.
Oh, the MSBA.
Chat.
So, yeah, I'll probably come in maybe from in my other place where I can get on the computer and.
I did Paige Fisher.
Came from Hibbing.
What's that?
Came from Hibbing.
And he was most of last week, came back today and they didn't wanna.
Yeah.
That was my question, one of my questions.
Yeah.
Was,
Oh, it's that street.
your login to your network, I don't know who
And so then it's not.
signs this or how that, you haven't received that yet.
I don't think so. Like the internal network? Like the-
Yeah, just to even log on to the.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is it-
Oh, it's not- why would it not? Why is it not just the-
A lot of the stuff you
And it's like.
Google Drive,
Okay.
better, that's what Casey said now, but I'm sure you'll need it.
Yeah, I mean, if I come in on Friday and I check down on the computer, like I could just take a picture. But
I can double check.
you want me to try email it to each?
You
And
can,
just-
I'll double check for you. I'll follow up with him because I I just want to give them a day to.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Would you mind though? Can I have your cell number? It might be
Absolutely.
easier just to, even just send you a quick.
Yeah, text me anytime.
Can't tell people.
And if you text me, test tonight, I can save you as well.
Okay.
Our batteries, so. Yeah. Any type of, but, well, right, but the storage technology is very expensive. It's very expensive. It's getting upgraded. It is changing rapidly, whatever progress is like.
What's your last?
It's improving, but the expense is still. Yeah. The technology.
Now, I don't know.
Okay.
218-244-1788.
But the buck's still there, right? You know, the cost is still,
I'll get
that
it
initial cost.
or email you too. I
You
just
get more efficient dramatically.
I'll find out for sure.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
And I was supposed to work, it was my last day in
Yeah.
heavy. I don't know. I just let you know or let somebody know. Whatever if I decide not to.
To come in or
Yeah.
if you try to like your vacation days.
Yeah.
is what you're thinking? Yeah. So I'll let you.
It's kind of weird because it's like this.
As of now, I'm leaning towards just
An electronic things where.
Okay.
Like, it's
either way.
Okay. I'll talk to a few people and find out what there's stuff. I don't want you to come in like.
Yeah.
And then it just sends you the stuff.
And I have a laptop I could bring to the trip.
So you can mail it back.
I'm not worried about it.
Okay. I'll find out.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
where they can, it's like.
Right.
And so, anyway,